on Chapter 10, which is titled Solo Effort. My mouth went dry. My hands started shaking. Peter's eyes were so wide they looked like ping pong balls. "Shh," cautioned Ms. Schwartz, "don't make a sound." I appreciated the advice, but I had already figured that much out on my own. "What are we going to do?" I thought. To my surprise, Ms. Schwartz answered me. "Wait till he reports in," she said, "then you can sneak out." "Did you just read my mind?" I thought. "Just the message you sent me," she replied. That was a relief. There's a lot going on inside my head that I don't want anyone to know, not even Miss Schwartz. I looked around the attic. If Broxholm came up here, we were sunk. I couldn't see a single thing to hide behind. Suddenly I heard that horrible music again. "This is our chance," I whispered. "He must be in his dressing room. I bet he's taking off his face and getting ready to report to the ship." "Then let's go," said Peter. "Wait," I said desperately. "What about Miss Schwartz? We can't leave her here like this." "You have to," she thought at us. "I'm all right for the time being. The best thing you can do for me is unmask the alien." I still hesitated. "Go," she shouted inside my head. The message was so powerful I staggered back from the force field. Casting a last look over my shoulder, I took Peter's hand. He didn't pull away. This wasn't romance. It was terror. Each of us needed someone to hold on to as we sneaked down the stairway. When we reached the bottom, Peter opened the door as quietly as he could. The tiny click was lost in the awful screech of the alien music. Moving slowly, he peered around the edge. "No one in sight," he whispered. "Then let's go." My heart was pounding in my ears. I don't think I've ever been so frightened in my life. I had a feeling Broxholm would jump out and grab us at any second. For one horrible instant, I wondered if the mirror on his dressing table might be at the right angle to show our reflections as we stepped out of the attic. I imagined him racing into the hallway, his Mr. Smith face hanging down around his chin, ready to turn us into a pair of puddles on the floor, or whatever a person from his planet did to kids he caught snooping in his attic. The screeching music continued. Still moving slowly, Peter closed the door behind us. That seemed like a waste of time until I realized he was afraid that if he didn't secure it, the door might swing open after he had let go of it. One noise like that and we were dead meat. Dropping to our hands and knees, we crawled along the edge of the wall. I couldn't help it. When I was opposite the door of Broxholm's room, I glanced in. Broxholm was sitting there, peeling off his face. I prayed that he wouldn't see me and crept forward. We slid down the stairs, slipped out the front door, and ran for all we were worth. After about 3 blocks, we stopped to catch our breath, but not for long. In addition to everything else, I was worried that since Broxholm was back, my parents might be home too. But when we reached my house, I could see that I had made it back first. That wasn't too surprising. My folks often stayed to talk with the other parents after the formal meeting was over. It was even possible that the meeting was still going on and Broxholm had managed to slip out early. Peter walked me to my door. I thought that was brave of him, especially when I watched him walk off into the darkness and realized how frightened I would be if I had to go home alone. That skinny kid had more courage than anyone I knew. As for me, I was terrified. I went around and turned on every light in the house. Don't ask me what good I thought that would do. All I know is it made me feel better. Then I sat in the living room, waiting for my parents to come home and worrying that Broxholm might show up first. All in all, I decided it had been a good night's work. Even if I hadn't found anything to prove my story, at least one other person now knew what was going on. Even more important, we had found Miss Schwartz. But what should we do now? The crucial thing was to reveal Broxholm for what he really was. But how could we do that without getting turned into puddles on the floor? Our only advantage was that he didn't know we knew his secret. If we could make whatever we did seem innocent, he might not guess what we were up to. Of course, the most obvious thing was just to pull off his mask. But how do you pull a mask off an alien's face? I spent the whole night trying to find the courage to do what I knew I had to do the next day. Mr. Bamwick had scheduled me for an extra lesson that morning. As usual, Smith Broxholm shuddered when he saw me pick up my piccolo. Let him shudder. If he kidnapped me, maybe I'd play the piccolo all the way to the next galaxy. The reason for the extra lesson was that Bam Boom wanted me to work on a solo he had asked me to play for the spring concert. We are doing the greatest march of all time, The Stars and Stripes Forever by John Philip Sousa. If you don't know it, you should go get a recording and listen to it. It's great. Anyway, the high point of the march is this incredibly neat, incredibly difficult piccolo solo. Mr. Bamwick had told me way back in February that he had wanted our band to do this march for 7 years. He said he had just been waiting until he had a piccolo player good enough to handle the solo, and now he thought he had one, me. I was flattered that he had so much faith in me. The problem was, I didn't have that much faith in me. Oh, I could do most of the solo right most of the time, but there was one trill near the end that I always messed up. Let me tell you, if you're going to play something in concert, you don't want to get it almost right, you want it perfect. But Mr. Bamwick was determined we would play The Stars and Stripes Forever that spring, or die trying. The way my lesson was going that Friday, it looked as if we were going to die. Come on, Susan, said Mr. Bamwick after I messed up for the 3rd time. The concert is next week. Did you practice last night? I shook my head. I didn't have time, I said. I knew it sounded pretty lame, but how could I tell him I hadn't practiced because I had been prowling through my teacher's house trying to find evidence to prove he was an alien? I could see Mr. Bamwick trying to control himself. I had to give him credit. He knows that it doesn't do any good to make a kid feel stupid, but I could tell that he really wanted to explode. By the time I left his room, I was pretty upset myself. That wasn't all bad. Being angry gave me the strength to do what I knew I had to do. Taking a deep breath, I marched back to my room. I paused outside the door and took another deep breath. Then I went down through the door, staggered over to Mr. Smith's desk, and pretended to faint. On the way down, I grabbed for his ear.